Hi, folks. This is Abel James, and thanks so much for listening to the Fat Burning Man Show, where we talk about real food and real results. Today's show is with the brilliant Paul Jaminet, the author of The Perfect Health Diet. After having Paul on the show a few months ago, I was happy to touch upon some of the cheekier topics this time around, including the health benefits of drinking, why eating white rice won't kill you, and of course, fecal transplants. Now, if I had to recommend one book for optimizing your health, The Perfect Health Diet is it. In fact, my nutritional strategy, which I call the Wild Diet, is actually closer to the Perfect Health Diet than it is to even Paleo or Primal. This is required reading, folks. Paul's content is tirelessly researched, and his nutritional approach is balanced, reasonable, and easy to implement into your own life. So do yourself a favor, grab a copy of the new expanded version of The Perfect Health Diet. Now, before we get to the show, I know that a lot of you are probably wondering, hey, Abel, why did your show disappear? And we had a bit of a scare, didn't we? Last Sunday, I was chillaxing, just watching football, when I opened this bomb from Apple that said in the subject line, iTunes Store podcast rejected notification, basically saying that my podcast, The Fat Burning Man Show, had been pulled from iTunes with absolutely no explanation. So I went to go log in because I was curious. I thought it was just some glitch or something like that. I opened up iTunes and it says, your request could not be completed. The item you've requested is not currently available in the U.S. store. Then the flood of emails came. Where's your show? Not only were the many thousands of you out there unable to listen to the show, but you couldn't even find it on iTunes. You got an error message. My show was gone, vanished, kaput. So I was shocked, befuddled, and a little bit pissed, not going to lie. So gritting my teeth and missing my football game, I wrote to Apple and explained that I have hundreds of 5-star reviews and 100,000 plus monthly listens, often rank in the top 10 and often number 1 in all of health, and Apple's even featured my show on multiple occasions. So please help me understand what happened and how I can get resubmitted to be included in the store. If there's anything I need to fix, I'm happy to do it. Now, I really appreciate Apple having a platform like a podcast to make it easier for little guys like me to bring my show to you. But it was quite an adventure trying to get any information out of Apple over the course of the next few days, and they threw me some of these gems. Abel, as I informed, that podcasts are removed on very rare occasion. I am sorry, but I do not know why your podcast was removed from iTunes Store. I'm sorry, but the iTunes Store normally doesn't provide assistance by telephone. Thank you for your understanding and patience. Apple appreciates your business. I'm sure that they do. So I spoke with more than a half dozen Apple employees, all of whom claimed to know nothing about how to get my show back and said there basically wasn't anything I could do about it. And several Apple employees recommended that I start all over with a new show. So I want to say thanks to the many fans out there who spammed Apple on Facebook, Twitter, and emails to get my show back. Some of you even started organizing a petition, which is so awesome. You guys are amazing. It was a crappy experience to be sure, but your support, as always, is absolutely inspiring. So after more than 2 days of bombarding Apple with pissed off rants, my show mysteriously popped back up on iTunes. I lost my ranking on the top charts, but we'll get those back, won't we? So the most mysterious thing is that Apple still has no comments, explanations, or tips on how to prevent this from happening again. I bring them, as they eventually mentioned, hundreds of thousands of listeners. So if there's anyone from Apple listening out there, please let me know what I can do to make sure that this doesn't happen again. I realize that I constantly say things and bring on guests who tick off the Monsantos, General Mills, and probably the Apples of the world. I don't know if it was the content of my show that was the reason that all this happened, but I wouldn't really be surprised. But I won't censor my show. I've been very clear about this, and I'll never let any advertiser, platform, middleman, or guest influence my overall message of health. This stuff is too important. So what does all of this mean? What can you guys do? Well, the show is on, baby. I'll keep these puppies coming to you as long as you want to listen. Do I need iTunes for that? No, not necessarily. If you want to guarantee that you have access to the show, I suggest that you sign up for my mailing list on fatburningman.com and also subscribe to the RSS feed. And to stack the deck in your favor, I suggest that you also follow me on Facebook. And the address there is facebook.com/fatburningman. And you can follow me on Twitter. And the handle there is fatburnman. No ing. So, I may mysteriously disappear from iTunes, but I'm not going anywhere, I assure you. And one last thing, if you haven't yet left a review on iTunes for the show, please do. As I mentioned, my rankings in the iTunes charts were stripped when they pulled the show from iTunes. So I need all the help that I can get to get back to the top, but we're going to get there. All right, enough of that. On to the show with one of my favorite authors in all of health, Mr. Paul Jaminet. In today's show, we cover how the same diet can cause weight loss and weight gain, the ins and outs of a fecal transplant, how most Americans are eating industrial waste products as a staple of their diet, and why sipping wine with your steak is actually good for you. That's good news for me. All right, let's go hang out with Paul. Today we're here once again with Paul Jaminet, the author of the brand spanking new version of The Perfect Health Diet. Thanks so much for sending a copy. I know tons of my listeners are probably jealous, Paul. Not only are you brilliant, you're also sweet people. That was it was really nice that you autographed it and sent a little card too.
Well, it's great fun to be on the show with you, Abel, and I know you enjoyed the previous version, and I've really enjoyed talking to you about the book and the ideas in the book.
Well, thanks so much. As I said before the interview, it really is one of my favorites, especially in the field. And when I got this new version on it of your book, I actually put it on top of the old version. And this one has some heft. I think I read that it has somewhere more than like 1,000 citations. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So
Wow.
We actually put the citations on our website. There were too many for the book.
Right.
The book itself, it's a good-sized book, but it's not... I don't think it would be called the doorstopper. It's not. No, it's not. As long as good calories, bad calories.
Right. You know, it's not intimidating, and that's one of the things that I like about it, because clearly the research is there. You spent a lot of time on the book, but what you've been able to do is communicate these very heady ideas and intellectual ideas in a simple way that I think a lot of people can understand.
Yeah. Well, I think. There's a great quote from Alfred North Whitehead, who was a very good philosopher about 100 years ago, and he said that the only simplicity you can trust is the simplicity on the far side of complexity. And the thought is once you've really worked through everything, all of the ideas, then things become simple again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's sort of the point where we feel we've been getting to with dietary science. So, my wife and I have spent the last 7 years developing our ideas, and I think at this point we've kind of, gotten past the peak in complexity, and we're working on simplifying the ideas now.
Mm-hmm.
And we really have great confidence in what we figured out. So we started from a paleo template. We started with the paleo diet in 2005,
mm-hmm.
and it had really dramatic effects for both of us. And, in my case, it made some symptoms much better and some symptoms worse.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really fascinating to me. And it was the first thing I tried that, actually made some things better. And,
Right.
So it was the first thing that gave me hope that I could fix my health. And a clear path to work on, but it also, the negative effects were really interesting, and so it became kind of a scientific puzzle, and it's taken us 7 years to get to this point where we really feel we have a good understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And also I think we figured out why mainstream diet scientists go wrong, because the way they approach dietary science. It's sort of, simple and obvious. You look at what people eat and then see what their health is,
Mm-hmm.
and, find the people who are eating in ways that make them healthy. And it turns out that really doesn't work for several reasons. It's just very difficult to tell what people are eating.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell what whole populations are eating because we have good statistics on, how much food is grown, how much of each type of food is sold, but then you have it's difficult to match up at a population level. There's something called the ecological fallacy, which makes it difficult to make inferences. You can get misled.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the individual level, people try to measure what individuals eat by food questionnaires, but they're just not accurate.
Right.
And then clinical trials and stuff where you control their food intake are too short to generate diseases.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots of reasons why the conventional approaches just, aren't illuminating. And, especially when you add into it that, most people eat very similar diets, which turns out to be because we have this evolved food reward system in the brain, which tries to get us to eat a certain way. And when certain foods are available, people eat the same kinds of foods worldwide. So everybody around the world eats a 50% carb diet. And, so if everybody's eating the same, it's hard to tell, is a low carb diet healthy or not?
Right, right.
Um, and the fact that everybody eats that way, it doesn't mean that a 50% carb diet is optimal. It just means that in the Paleolithic, carbs were hard to get.
Right.
And today, carbs are easy to get. And
too easy.
yeah. And, so our brain evolved to, try and motivate hunter-gatherers to do all that work, to dig tubers out of the ground and,
right.
Get 100 calories per pound of tuber.
Mm-hmm.
And, and that motivation, now that we can get 1,500 calories a pound from sugar and bread, can easily lead us to overeat carbs.
Absolutely. And cravings change drastically based upon what's around you. I've noticed this in my own experience, especially when I was kind of transitioning away from the carb-fueled lifestyle. I noticed that when my brain is aware, either consciously or subconsciously, that I have cookies in the cabinet or something else in the fridge or just something around, I know that it's there and it's always kind of tugging at me. And I think that causes me to crave it. And I know that the research kind of supports that as well. Now, when I don't have that around, which I don't anymore, one of the best strategies I think of eating well is to prevent yourself from ever craving it because you don't have it in the house. I don't really have those cravings either for those junk foods or popcorn or cookies or anything like that, or at least store-bought cookies. I still crave the other kind.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really powerful strategy. But what about, so you were talking about the research, and it's fascinating to me that all of this research is accessible, but the conclusions that you have taken from all of this research and pulling it together are so drastically different from the conventions of our society and others out there. So number one, I think that you're right, but how is, the conventional way of thinking about it, diet and fitness and all this other stuff, so off base?
Well, one of the interesting things is when you look at official dietary guidelines from around the world, they always encompass the way people in that country actually eat. So it's basically how people actually eat in that country, modified slightly by, based on scientific evidence. So if you look at the recommendations for omega-3 fat intake of different countries, the lower end is always what people in that country are eating, and the higher end is like 3 times as much. And that's true in every country. So in Japan, the recommended range doesn't overlap with ours because, we have a low omega-3 intake, and it recommends, that much plus or a little bit more. And in Japan, they have a much higher omega-3 intake, and the government recommends that much or a little bit more. And, so there's just, the conventional guidelines, they're driven to a great extent by politics and influence, vested interests, established interests, so around what people are actually eating, you have all these, agricultural system, these food companies, you have consumer preferences that, people like to eat that way. And there's a very high standard of evidence for recommending anything other than that. And conventional dietary science just, doesn't have enough solid evidence about what's optimal to, suggest anything different.
Right.
So, we can, there have been a lot of wrong turns and missteps, like the lipid hypothesis days and, promoting omega-6 fats in order to lower serum cholesterol, hoping that would have good results. And
right.
I think that's backfired in a terrible way. I think that's probably the single biggest cause of the obesity epidemic, is all of the soybean oil and, other types of omega-6 rich vegetable seed oils that we're eating.
Cholesterol free.
Yeah, and it doesn't have that big an impact on cholesterol,
Right.
which is a good thing because we need that cholesterol.
Hmm.
Um, but it has a very damaging effect on, creates lipid peroxidation. It damages our metabolism in various ways. It disturbs our gut flora. So there's a lot of problems with the obesity epidemic. And Stefan Guyene was generous enough to give me some data he'd compiled on the level of omega-6 fats in adipose tissue in the United States,
Hmm.
in Americans. And that's been rising dramatically since the 1970s.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise
Um,
me.
and, so we're eating too much of it, we can't get rid of it, and it just accumulates in our bodies.
And it doesn't even taste that good.
No, it doesn't.
So can we just speak generally about why a high-fat diet, at least relatively speaking, is superior to a high-carb, more standard diet, or even a high-protein diet?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to say we need some of all three.
Hmm.
So there's an optimum of each. So you don't want to go too high fat
Right.
either. Um, and so, but basically, at a high level, I would say there's two things. First of all, saturated and monounsaturated fats are very benign molecules.
Hmm.
Uh, they're not dangerous. They don't oxidize easily, react easily, um, and we have an infinite amount of storage space for them. We have adipose tissue if we need to put it there. They constitute something like 80% of the fatty acids in cell membranes.
Hmm.
So cells are composed of membranes and then a cytosol, water-soluble fraction, and so they're a major part of our lean tissue mass. Once you get past water, then we have protein, fats, and minerals that mineralize our bones and teeth, and dissolved electrolytes. So, we have all these. We have a pretty large mass of all these fats. So we've got lots of places to put them
Hmm.
where they're safe and stable. Uh, so we can very easily eat them with nothing going wrong, even if we're eating a temporary excess. Um, and we can very easily metabolize them. Mitochondria burn them very cleanly. And in fact, I think mitochondria actually prefer fat to glucose. They burn much more easily, and they also um, the way that they're burned gives mitochondria more control over the cell and its metabolism.
Hmm.
So the mitochondria become healthier when you eat a saturated fat-rich diet, and they tend to be less healthy when you eat a carbohydrate-rich or polyunsaturated fat-rich diet.
Hmm.
So, so the shift that we've made toward more carbohydrates, more sugar, and more omega-6 fats has really undermined the health of our mitochondria, the health of our cells, and it leads to some of these metabolic dysfunctions.
Hmm.
Um, so, uh, you know, in general, I would say optimal for humans is to eat about 30% carbohydrate, around 15% protein, and around 55% fat, with nearly all of that saturated and monounsaturated.
Hmm.
So less than 5% polyunsaturated, with a balance between omega-6 and omega-3.
And just for the people out there who don't really work in percentages, I know that you equate it to food in a different way also. Can you kind of explain that?
Yeah, well, we recommend eating basically paleo uh, plant and animal foods. So
Hmm.
especially paleo plant foods, things that could be hunted and gathered, foraged in the Paleolithic. Um, so not eating a lot of wheat, corn, modern agricultural plants. And most of those don't have very many calories. So even though we recommend getting more calories from fat than from carbs, we recommend eating a lot more plants
Hmm.
than animal foods. So a good mix is usually about maybe 3 pounds a day of plant foods and maybe 3/4 of a pound of animal foods like meat, fish, eggs. Um, and that generally works out to about the right, uh, plus a few tablespoons of fat or oil like butter or
Hmm.
coconut oil. And that will work out to just about the optimal macronutrient ratios.
Now, one thing that you wrote in the book that I thought was so interesting, because not many people talk about this, is that the same diet can cause weight loss and then later weight gain. So can you explain that a little bit? How is that possible?
Yeah, well, a lot of people experience this, that when they try to lose weight, they'll go on a diet and they'll lose weight for a time, and then the weight loss will stop, and then the weight will start coming back on, even
Hmm.
though they're on the same diet, and they start getting hungrier and hungrier, and it becomes less and less tolerable, and eventually they have to eat more, and their weight comes back on. And I think we have a theory for why that happens. Um, you might call it, we didn't use this term in the book, but it's sort of a generalization of this idea that was put forward by a couple of scientists, one from Australia, one from New Zealand, called the protein leverage hypothesis of obesity. We could call it the nutrient leverage
Hmm.
hypothesis. So the idea is that your appetite exists to make your body well nourished. Whenever you're missing something that your body needs, then your brain will try to get you to eat it. And for some things, you may have a specific appetite, um, for that particular thing. So at least in animals, in some cases, like pregnancy, you may have a specific craving for a type of food that provides a specific nutrient that you
Hmm.
need. But in most cases, it's kind of a generalized appetite. If you're missing something, your brain tells you, go get some food, or maybe go get some plant foods or some carbs. And, and those may have been associated in the Paleolithic with the nutrients you need. Uh, but our evolution didn't necessarily equip us to really detect every single nutrient and then specifically find, uh, the foods that had it. We developed our food reward system, our appetite regulation system, in order to make us well nourished in the Paleolithic environment.
Hmm.
And yeah, so it motivates us to go out and get the kinds of foods that were available in the Paleolithic. And I think if we eat Paleolithic style foods today, that appetite regulation system still works pretty well.
Yeah.
But if you start eating a diet which is missing something, then eventually you'll become deficient in that, and your brain will figure out that your body needs something, and it will tell you go get more food.
Right.
And so what often happens, people eat a diet that makes them fat. So it's an unhealthy diet. Then they decide they want to lose weight. So they switch to a weight loss diet. And it's usually pretty calorie restricted. So that's a risk for, becoming deficient in nutrients.
Right.
And often it's some kind of extreme diet, like you may eat only lean meat or you
Or
may eat
grapefruit.
only vegetables. Yeah,
Yeah.
So eventually it's going to make you deficient in things. It's not a balanced diet and it's not providing everything you need. And, but a lot of deficiencies may take months to develop. Like for instance, scurvy, vitamin C deficiency can take, a year to develop.
Which happened to you, right?
Yeah, that did happen to me. After I started getting symptoms after about a year on very low carb paleo, and figured it out after about 18 months.
Wow.
Um, and a lot of B vitamin deficiencies will take a few weeks to develop. A lot of fat soluble vitamin deficiencies will take a few months. Uh, so it can take variable lengths of time before you become deficient in something. And, so people will start a new diet and they won't be deficient in anything for a while, and so the weight loss is smooth because they're restricting calories.
Hmm.
So, they lose some weight, but eventually they start getting nutrient deficiencies, and the brain says, hey, you need to eat more food in order to get these things, and your appetite goes up, and gradually the diet becomes intolerable, and you have a weight rebound. And so then people say, oh, this diet doesn't work. uh, my Atkins meat diet doesn't work, so maybe I should go to the other extreme. I'll do a vegan diet.
Mm-hmm.
And they try the vegan diet, and at first that works because they've totally changed the foods they're eating. They're now adding in the things that were missing in the previous diet,
Mm-hmm.
and
And
they
they have
start
a
losing weight.
stockpile of the other things.
Yeah, but then after a few months or however long, now they're deficient in the things their new diet lacks, and they go through the same cycle. So I think this is a very common experience, and the solution, I think, is if you want to lose weight, don't focus first on losing weight. Focus first on being healthy.
Yeah.
So focus first on eating a balanced diet. Your weight loss diet should be a diet you can eat for the rest of your life. It should also be your maintenance diet.
Mm-hmm.
And if a diet is really effective as a maintenance diet, if it will keep you at your normal weight forever, it will also enable you to lose weight.
Yeah.
So there's no need to go to an extreme diet. You should think about what maintenance diet you want to eat, get on that, and then maybe tweak it slightly in order to lose weight.
I really like that approach. Balance is always better. And it's a great point that hunger is fueled by a lack of nutrients, not a lack of food in your stomach. And I think that's one of the reasons that fasting becomes tolerable when your diet's in order.
Yeah, yeah. So, of course, food in your stomach does affect appetite in the short term,
Mm-hmm.
but what researchers think is, the brain is estimating, what you need in order to nourish your body. And so when you get some food in, it assumes that you're going to get some nutrients out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if all you ate were Twinkies and Hostess cupcakes,
Yeah,
then,
that would be false.
your brain will eventually figure out that it didn't get what it needed and will make you hungry again.
Mm-hmm.
So, depending on the quality of your diet, putting food in your stomach may be a short-term way to reduce appetite, but it's not necessarily going to reduce it, going to keep it low.
Right. And one other thing that you note in the book is that most obese people are malnourished or at least undernourished. And to lose fat, you want to become hunger-free at a minimum of calories. So how can someone say they're overweight, do that, become nourished, but also restrict calories to lose fat?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the design of our diet. So our diet was designed to achieve optimal nutrition of every nutrient that we're known to need. And it seems to do a pretty good job of that because in terms of reader results, the reports we get, the thing that is pretty much universal is I'm not hungry. I have minimal hunger. I have, all my cravings and binges went away. It's easy to fast now. So even if people aren't losing weight very quickly, or not at all, because for some people it's not always diet that is causing the excess weight.
Yeah.
But they still have the benefit of not being hungry, and of being able to eat, less than they were eating before, but still feel completely satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really, the first step in a healthy weight loss diet is getting to the point, where you know how to minimize the amount of food you eat, but you're still completely satisfied. You can fast easily. You have very limited hunger, cravings.
Yeah. Another thing you say is you say weight loss should be easy and hunger-free. But what can people do if, say, they switch to the maintenance style diet that they prefer, but then they hit a plateau? What sort of strategy should they employ then?
Yeah, well, obesity is, it has many causes, and I think there's probably at least 15 or 20 things we know about that promote weight gain and can cause obesity. And any one overweight person, may be overweight because 10 or 12 of those causes are operative in their case. And, so things like infections can contribute to it. I mentioned malnutrition. circadian rhythm disruption tends to promote weight gain, hypothyroidism. There's all kinds of causes. Um, so that's one reason why in our book we go through all these many different things that impact health. The reason our diet is called Perfect Health Diet is we really believe it's important. If you want to achieve good health, we think it's important to aim for perfect health.
Yeah.
Try to fix everything because, scientists, we don't know which causes are important in every case. So we can say with certainty that doing X is bad and will tend to lead to obesity and weight gain, but we can't necessarily say, whether how important X is for you, which are the specific things you could focus on. So we can't tell you here's a magic bullet for you, but we can tell you if you take care of all the risk factors that we know about, then you'll probably have a good outcome.
Yeah.
So, in cases where you fix your diet, then you should look at things like circadian rhythm factors, things like exercise, light exposure, sleep. You should look at the state of your thyroid, ask your doctor to check that. And you should look for any infections, see if you can treat them. You might do diagnostic testing for the health of your gut. And you can do a stool test to check for microbes in your gut that, so there's a big interaction. Your adipose tissue is actually an immune organ, and it helps regulate the immune. It helps regulate the gut flora and adjust the state of the immune white blood cells and how they interact with the gut. And so if you have some kind of gut infection, it will often lead to an activation of adipose tissue. They'll grab more fat, and you'll gain weight.
Yeah.
And you can also get direct infections of the adipose cells that cause you to gain weight. And so doctors haven't really, and medicine hasn't really put as much effort into studying this as it should. But often if you get a helpful doctor, you may be able to diagnose something, treat it, and if you do, that can help a lot.
Yeah, that sounds nice. That's easier said than done, unfortunately, especially these days. But you spoke a bit about gut health, and one of the more interesting things you mentioned in the book is the subject of fecal transplants. So for those folks who aren't familiar with that aspect of gut health, can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, well, we evolved in a sort of symbiotic fashion with gut bacteria, and there are gut bacteria that are evolved to living in our gut, and they can actually, many of those species can actually digest our digestive tract mucus. So our mucus is partly a protective layer, which has a lot of antimicrobial peptides. It helps prevent infections from entering the body through the gut. But it also nourishes some of our friendly bacteria. And those friendly bacteria, they themselves have all these antimicrobial compounds, and they're good at, fighting pathogens. And, so it's important to have a good gut flora in order to prevent yourself from developing infections. So many infections enter the body through the gut. The microbes may be found in food, and you eat them, and if they aren't digested or they aren't killed by gut bacteria, and they can enter the body, then they can start establishing infections. And so a good, healthy gut flora are your friends, but we've gone through this age. You get your gut bacteria from your mother to a great extent, and also from food if you make fermented food. But people don't make fermented food, and they take antibiotics a lot, which kill off a lot of gut flora, and then they get infections. And the infectious pathogens, they're in a competition with the other gut bacteria, so they try to kill off gut flora. And we find that a lot of people have, very restricted gut flora. So a normal person may have maybe 750 different bacterial species in their gut. A lot of people with digestive tract problems have only maybe 400 species.
Wow.
Um, but some of them are pathogenic. So, it makes a big difference if you have that balance. And the key things to fixing it are, one, are don't eat toxic foods, which attack the integrity of the gut. That means things like wheat. Don't eat things which disturb the gut flora, like sugar and omega-6 fats. Eat healthy Paleolithic type foods like roots, tubers, corms, fruits, berries, a variety of vegetables, meat, healthy fats. And so, those things, those are the foods that our friendly probiotic bacteria, evolved to eat. So these germs have a long coevolutionary history with us. And, so if you eat those things, it'll tend to promote good bacteria. And many of those plants also have antimicrobial compounds, which will help discourage some of the pathogens.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're eating a lot of sugar, say you're drinking a lot of Coca-Cola, which I used to do.
Yuck.
The calories in there are very accessible to pathogens.
Sure.
Whereas if you're eating, say, potatoes and spinach and tomatoes, then they're much more likely to promote beneficial bacteria.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can eat fermented foods. So all of those strategies are, sort of slow acting. They found if people don't eat fermented vegetables, it can take years for the diversity of the gut flora to come back.
Wow.
After a round of antibiotics. And, just eating food and letting the gut flora evolve, it can take quite a while to recover from something, like an infection or a round of antibiotics that disturbs the flora.
Mm-hmm.
And if things get really far off, like in people who have ulcerative colitis or things like that, then it may be extremely difficult to recover. And so in cases like that, you can do things like a fecal transplant, where you basically take the feces from someone who has a healthy gut flora and have a doctor put it into your colon, and then you'll get all of those, 700 to 1,000 species in a mix that is pretty healthy. And often that can work miracle cures in these some of these cases.
Yeah, that's amazing. Is that something that a typical doctor would do, or do you kind of have to search that out?
You would have to search that out, but it's getting a lot more common. A lot of doctors are recognizing benefits of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that difficult. They basically, they get a donor, they mix their feces with a saline solution, and they, much like they would in a colonoscopy, they'd insert kind of a tube and, just kind of inject the stuff into your colon.
Wow.
So they would do preparation. They would give you, antibiotics, or, if whatever you had was not bacterial, they'd give you, something for that to try and clean out whatever bad flora you have, so
Sure.
the new stuff can take root more easily.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'd have you fast and go through that kind of treatment, and take these things that cause diarrhea and help clear out your gut, and then they insert the new stuff, and so it's a pretty simple procedure, and it is getting more common.
Yeah, it's a brave new world.
Yeah.
Now, I did want to talk about this a little bit. I know we talked about it in our previous interview, but obviously the hotly debated topic that a lot of people are curious about, especially hearing your side of the story, is the idea of safe starches. And I know that you recommend white potatoes and rice. What would you say to people who exclaim that blood sugar issues are really important, especially when you're eating those foods, and so they choose to avoid them?
Yeah. Well, blood sugar issues are important. Um, I think, but the main thing is, we evolved an ability to handle these kinds of foods.
Hmm.
The key thing to do to make sure you don't have blood sugar problems from them, first is to eat them regularly, so that you become, adapted to, your body's not afraid of being so short of glucose that it's, minimize the ability of many tissues to utilize it,
Hmm.
which is what happens if you eat extremely low carb, and then it becomes more difficult to handle a big dose of white rice or something.
Right.
Um, but the other main thing to do is starches should only be eaten as part of meals, uh, and the meals should be balanced. They should have fiber from vegetables. They should have fat. Uh, they should have some protein from meat, fish, or eggs. Good vegetables. It's actually been found if you have a very small amount of fructose, like the amount in some sugary vegetables, like
Hmm.
say beets, onions, carrots, you want to have a balanced meal. And then chew your food well, so that you get, plenty of saliva mixed in with it, so you produce some amylase for digesting starches. And people who produce more amylase or more saliva have a better glycemic control. So we have our Perfect Health Diet food plate, and it's in the shape of an apple. And the body of the apple is really the design of a meal. So if you make all of your meals balanced, where you have some starches, some vegetables, some meat, some fat, healthy fat, uh, and then, chew your food, um, well, then you shouldn't have problems with blood glucose regulation.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things is that I think people go after the safe starches idea, calling it crazy or kind of on the fringe. But I think it's so balanced, this approach that you take.
Yeah, and it's odd coming from the paleo community because uh, the in the Paleolithic, starches were a very important part of the diet.
Hmm.
And we talk about this in the new edition of the book. Actually, thanks to Melissa McEwen, who informed me about this. But there have been studies in hunter-gatherers, modern hunter-gatherers, they all eat starches.
Hmm.
And the ones who live in environments that don't have starches available locally, like rainforest environments,
Hmm.
say the Congo pygmies, they all trade for starches. And it was proposed by some anthropologists that it might be impossible for humans to live in forest environments that don't have starches, unless they could trade with outsiders for starches.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, and some of these hunter-gatherer tribes have separate names for basically for meat and starch, and they'll say they're separate names for starvation that refer to meat starvation or starch starvation,
Hmm.
and they'll say they're starving if they don't have any starch, even if they have abundant meat.
Right.
Uh, and I think when we look back anthropologically, it's except for a few rare cases like the Inuit where they lived in extreme environments, it's really hard to find cases of people who didn't eat starch.
Yeah. Another thing that you mentioned that I really liked was traditional foods are unsafe when hurriedly prepared, which is that's especially important today when we have all these industrial mechanisms that have been introduced into the food supply and preparation of food that's essentially being sold as making it easier for people who are home and time savers and things like that. Like instant oatmeal comes to mind, but they're not taking the time to actually, sprout these foods or prepare them in traditional ways. So what does that do when you use a blast furnace instead of a more delicate way of preparing food, say?
Yeah, well, this is a huge issue, and I wish it were more studied so that we could quantify how important it is. But here's what's known. Basically about half of the toxins that we get, nearly all of the toxins that we get are in our food, and about half of them are generated during cooking. And basically, very rapid cooking at high temperatures is what generates those toxins. And, so you can generate a lot if you, go out on your barbecue grill and, drip fat and get smoke all over the stuff and, burn it to, blacken the meat.
Right.
But actually the industrial processing, they try and race the food through the factory, so their focus is not on making the food as healthy as can be. It's on, low cost of production. So they don't use gentle cooking methods like, like boiling or steaming, which have a very controlled temperature. They won't go above 100 degrees Celsius. Instead they use these dry heat methods that can reach very high temperatures in the food. And that can create new toxins. And it also, and this is interesting, it fails to destroy natural toxins. So in general, cooking, especially cooking in water or steam, destroys a great many of the toxins that are naturally found in food. But the industrial methods don't. So especially for wheat, the methods of processing wheat in factories are very poor at destroying wheat toxins. So wheat, if you boil your wheat, like get thin pasta and boil it at home, it'll be safer than if you get, these packaged cookies, or whatever that were made in a factory. So we know that industrial food is more toxic than food cooked at home, and the thing we don't know is how big a health effect do these toxins have, but it could be very large. So, we cited some studies. We cited this one in Japan, where they looked at families where the children eat bread and wheat, and families where they only eat rice. And the children who ate rice had 4 more IQ points than the children who routinely ate wheat.
Wow.
And they could notice changes in the brain structure. There are also differences in lifespan, life expectancy. Places where white rice is the staple tend to live longer than places where wheat is a staple. So, there could be pretty significant effects to some of these food toxins. So white rice is quite low in food toxins. That's why we call it a safe starch. The toxins it does have are generally destroyed in cooking.
Right.
Whereas wheat is rich in toxins and they're not so easily destroyed. So comparing those two, and in the China study, wheat was the single worst food in terms of correlation with health, and white rice was the single best food because
amazing.
they were staple foods and eaten in different areas, and places that ate white rice were healthier than the places that ate wheat. So, there's all these hints that it could be a very large effect, from these food toxins, but we don't know for sure, and it would take 70 years to do a controlled study.
Yeah.
So it's not going to happen. But I think it's prudent to follow the paleo approach and avoid Neolithic foods that are known to be rich in toxins.
Right.
And it's especially important even if you're going to eat them, you should eat them cooked at home rather than prepared in industrial processes that that tend to increase the toxicity.
Right. And that's a really good point that you mentioned, too. They're not treated this way or prepared this way for their health benefits. And often it's at the cost of the health benefits.
Yeah, and that's a general problem with our food production system, and both from a lot of the farming and the way animals are handled, and through packaged food production, is it's it's all been oriented at cost reduction. So when we had the Green Revolution and they introduced all these dwarf wheat varieties,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't really examine which variety of wheat is healthier to eat. They just said, oh, we just doubled the crop yields, and
Right.
it's much cheaper to produce.
Yeah.
And so on. It's the same way with genetically modified organisms, and being able to use more pesticide on them, and and other factors. It's really at least so far, cost and lowering cost has been the driving factor, it seems, and healthfulness hasn't. So it's good to see the organic movement and local farms and things like that, taking an interest in, creating an alternative um, value network that,
Mm-hmm.
that values healthfulness of food. But there's still a lot we need to learn about, what makes food healthful and what doesn't.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea to patronize your local farmers, just to encourage people, help them make some money, and help keep alternatives alive, so that I'm not aware that there are good tests out there of the healthfulness of um, organic food or so on. There were a few studies earlier this year that didn't show much of an effect, but it's hard to test these things. But I think they could have a very big health impact.
Absolutely. And there is so much that we don't know, that science doesn't understand right now. And I'm going to quote your book again just because I love it so much. Food scientists resemble the sorcerer's apprentice, meddling with things they do not fully understand, with consequences we cannot confidently predict. And I want to put an exclamation after after that sentence.
Yeah, that's right. So, there was no food science until, maybe 130 years ago. And it developed, in the beginnings of the industrial era, kind of after the Civil War in the United States, where, chemistry became a science in the 19th century. And people got interested in thinking about, and they had all these waste products that couldn't be eaten. Like, we grew all this cotton, and they separate, the cotton fiber from the cotton seeds, and they had all this waste cotton seed,
Mm-hmm.
in which they couldn't use for anything, and it was extremely poisonous. And so these chemists started thinking about how can we turn all these waste seeds into food. And so Wesson oil, was invented by this chemist. I think his first name was Charles Wesson. And, so he figured out how to take a lot of toxins out of cottonseed oil. And, so put these, so that was Wesson oil. And, since we started down that road, vegetable seed oils have been the cheapest source of oil, and we're still relying heavily on soybean oil today.
Yeah.
Um, so all of these oils are pretty toxic, and they go through lots of processing, and they're definitely much healthier than they would be. Like if you ate natural cottonseed, you would be paralyzed and rendered infertile, and have all kinds of other problems. So the modern forms that we eat are much healthier than the natural forms, but
Or less unhealthy anyway.
that doesn't mean that we know for certain that they're completely completely safe.
Yeah.
And they also tend to be very high in omega-6 fats, which we're learning are very bad. So
Right. And I don't think most people are aware that they're eating industrial waste products, not really food per se.
yeah, and it's yeah, I mean, actually, cottonseed oil is still a pretty frequently used food oil today.
Yeah. It's shocking. Well, we're running out of time, but I have a vested interest in this question. um, you mentioned in the book that moderate drinking, 1 to 3 a day, might actually be healthful.
Yeah, that's right. And, that's an interesting question. So, epidemiologically, it looks like, it's a little unclear. Is it healthier to drink one glass of wine a day than none, or are they the same?
Yeah.
But it certainly doesn't appear to be worse. And there's actually an argument that it might be better. And the argument is that many foods nowadays contain methanol, which is another kind of alcohol which is rather toxic. And if you drink the kind of alcohol that's in alcoholic beverages, ethanol, then you'll metabolize the methanol in a much safer way. And you prevent yourself from it prevents some of the harm. So that could be a possible mechanism by which it's beneficial. So we don't really know for sure, but there don't seem to be major harmful effects until you get up to, at least 3
Yeah.
glasses a day. And, but it does interact somewhat with diet, and with infections like hepatitis, infections of the liver. And it's not so good to combine alcohol with polyunsaturated fat.
Right.
So we suggest, maybe don't eat alcohol when you eat salmon. We recommend eating salmon once a week for omega-3 fats. But have a glass of wine with dinner on the other nights.
So you want steak with your wine, but not nachos with your beer. Right?
Yep. Well, yeah, nachos and beer aren't the perfect health diet recommended forms of calories.
For a variety of reasons. But I'd actually never heard that before, that saturated fat actually protects from alcohol.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. It's so in order to create fatty liver disease, you need either the alcohol or fructose from sugar to interact with polyunsaturated fats to cause lipid peroxidation, and they sort of work together in several ways. One is that the fructose in alcohol helps to oxidize the lipids, turn them into toxins, but they also deplete the liver of ATP, which it needs to detoxify. And so in various ways, the combination helps to create fatty liver disease. And and basically, if you eat saturated fats, you can eat fructose or you can eat alcohol, and you won't get fatty liver disease.
That's so interesting. Well, we're just about out of time, but Paul, why don't you explain where folks can find your book as well as what you're working on next?
Well, come to our website, perfecthealthdiet.com, and there you'll find a link to tell you how to buy the book, and maybe a few reasons why you might want to. And, sort of projects we're working on. My wife and I are working on a cookbook, so that'll be a big project for next year. And we're also, I'm working with Dan Party of Dan's Plan.
Love Dan.
To put together a health program to help people implement all of the diet and lifestyle advice in our new edition. So our new edition discusses lifestyle factors a lot, including how to have good circadian rhythms, how to manage exercise, light exposure, when you eat, and other lifestyle factors in order to optimize your immunity and optimize health and longevity. So we're going to try and put that together in a way that makes it much more accessible and easy to adopt, that gives you guidelines. Here's what you do. So our book has our book has a meal plan template and some other things to help people do that, but we'll try and make it even easier.
Awesome. Well, Paul, it's always a pleasure to have you on, and I love talking to you. Like I've said before, this is one of my favorite health books of all time. So it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you, Abel. It's great to talk to you.
To hear more from Paul Jaminet, check out his blog at perfecthealthdiet.com. And you can also grab his book pretty much anywhere books are sold. It's called The Perfect Health Diet. And like I said before, I highly recommend that you check it out. And once again, lest I mysteriously disappear from iTunes again, please go to fatburningman.com and sign up for my mailing list and RSS feed. And fan me at Facebook, which is facebook.com/fatburningman. And follow me on Twitter, which is the handle FatBurnMan. I'm not a hard man to find, and I always appreciate hearing from you guys. All right, I've got lots of cool shows coming up with Jimmy Moore, Dave Asprey, Todd Herman, and many more coming up, so stay tuned, and happy holidays in the meantime. I'll be talking to you guys soon. Cheers.